President Obama and over 100 world leaders heading to Paris on Monday, not to discuss the recent terrorist attacks there, but to reach a global climate deal. So, Steve, what's a bigger threat to the world right now, terrorism or climate change?
Obviously, it's terrorism. I think Paris would be willing over the next 100 years to take 1 degree more in temperature in Fahrenheit than to continue to have the kind of terrorist attacks they had a few days ago. And this kind of willful oblivion to what is the real threat to the world is just absolutely astonishing. People are going to look back and say, what were these people thinking?
And, Bruce, the irony of this climate change meeting taking place in Paris, which is exactly where the attacks were a couple of weeks ago. Shouldn't they really be addressing terrorism rather than climate change right now?
Well, I think that they will be, and I think that if global warming and climate change leads to a scarcity of resources, which people think it will, then that's going to go back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's going to contribute to a poor economy and joblessness and make people vulnerable to joining some of these groups.
Well, Sabrina, the American people don't think so. They put terrorism as their #1 concern when you poll Americans. #2 is economy, 21%. Climate change is way down there, #7 with 3%, thinking that it's the most important issue.
No, absolutely. I'm sort of shocked that Paris hasn't actually canceled this gathering. I'm in LA this week, David, but I'm usually in DC. And when I'm in Washington, the first thing I think of each morning is this bridge I'm driving over secure from terrorist attacks? Can I bring my kids down to the national monuments and show them Washington? I am not thinking every day about how we can get together and fix climate change because we have a market that demands a clean environment. It is already pushing us towards cleaner technologies. We do not need a national or an international summit for this. We need to figure out how to deal with our terrorist problems.
And, Rich, a lot of people are saying that the president's goals about climate change and cutting back on carbon production are going to hurt the nation just when we need to be strong. For all the tens of billions of dollars we've spent on renewable energy, things like solar power, wind, look at what's happened. We've only increased about 1.5, a little more than that percentage point of the renewables that we use for energy. So it's not a payoff. There's no payoff there.
Yeah, and look, the economic recovery we've had is a very fragile one, and it's fragile throughout the world. And to make it even worse by driving up energy prices would probably create more terrorism than any little climate change that we're talking about.
But don't tell that, John Tamny, to Prince Charles, who says clearly that the cause of terrorism around the world is climate change. What do you say to that?
Oh, that's comical. Let's face it, some of the richest, most expensive cities on Earth are coastal cities. If, in fact, climate were a problem or global warming were a problem, you'd see rents falling, you'd see housing prices falling in these rich cities. Instead, they're rising, which is a powerful market signal that global warming is one of the biggest hoaxes ever foisted on mankind.
And I wonder what Prince Charles' carbon footprint is. I bet it's a lot bigger than a lot of people, but still, he thinks it's a concern. Bill, take a look at it. We've got a pie chart that shows what percent of the energy that we get is from renewables. It's only 10%. It's a little less than 10%, actually. The only way to cut back or to get that pie chart to the president's goals is by cutting back on the economy, by cutting back on those industries that depend on carbon fuels. You can't power a big manufacturing company with a windmill.
Well, first, let's get our priorities. Now, the biggest threats to America in descending order are terrorism and rogue state nukes, and then epidemics, and then climate change. And if you want to tackle #3, the right way to do it is something that I'm afraid, unfortunately, Steve Forbes doesn't like, nor does the president
Which is what?
A carbon tax.
Oh, yeah, right. And the American public will not, even when the Democrats controlled both houses, they couldn't push that through. But, Steve, the point is that the only way to reach the president's goals and the goals of so many people at that climate conference coming up in Paris is by cutting down on an already slow-growing economy tremendously, right?
Yes, it would. It would create a global depression. Spain, before the financial crisis, went whole hog on alternative energies, and they found out they spent $770,000 to create each green job, and it cost 2.5 regular jobs in the economy. So this is a jobs killer. And the only reason you got 10% renewables now, David, is because of massive government subsidies. Imagine where all that money could have gone, like things like fighting diseases like malaria that would have done real good for humanity.
Or tax credits for businesses. Bruce, again, you look at the figures. years for all the money. You're never going to get anybody that spent more money than President Obama on renewables, and yet he only lifted the amount of energy we get from renewables from 8% to 9%. Come on.
Well, I think that the good thing about this meeting is there's over 200 countries going to be there, and I think it's not a bad idea to go big and at least get some compromise. We don't even know if there will be an agreement, but it will be interesting to see what happens for sure.
Rich, what do you think does happen?
Well, what happens is you get these ridiculous proclamations, such as the U.S. EPA saying that by 2025 that the average fleet mileage of American cars has to be 54.5 miles per gallon. I mean, where do you get a number like that? And did they ever even consult anybody in the automobile industry?
Pretty much pie in the sky stuff. Thank you very much, gang. The Cash In Gang is getting ready to roll at the bottom of the hour. Eric, what do you got?
Hey, David, as terrorists say they'll use Syrian refugees to get to the U.S., Canada is planning to take in 25,000 of them. Is our northern border about to become a national security threat? Plus, bombs away, we're finally going after ISIS and their oil. Too little, too late, or better late than never. Don't be late. See you at 11:30.
All right, you do wonder what took them so long. Eric, thanks a lot. We'll be watching, but up here first, late on your taxes? Well, the IRS could be coming to collect, and a lot more than just your money. The infuriating details you don't want to miss coming next.